Are you in love with or involved with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, or maybe someone who just acts avoidant? Then this 4-video compilation is going to help you understand how people who have this tendency to be avoidant in relationship, how they function, why they do what they do, and how to deal with them. Remember, if you like these videos, subscribe to my channel, like this video below. It helps me out a ton so I can continue to create all these free videos and resources for you. And without further ado, here are the videos. Are you wondering if you or if someone you know has a dismissive avoidant attachment style? Here are some key signs of a dismissive avoidant. Sign number 1. A strong need for emotional independence and a fear of others depending on you. So if you're someone who feels that you can do it all on your own, other people are just making everything worse, they're such a bother, you can't delegate anything, people always screw up and you're the only one who can do it right. That's definitely a sign of an avoidant pattern. At the same time, if you hate when people become emotionally needy and dependent on you, that is also a sign of avoidant patterns. Avoidants, they really don't handle this very well. They value freedom, they value independence, freedom of choice, not feeling tied down, because they don't want to be there for anyone emotionally, just the same as they're not depending on you to be there for them emotionally. Sign number 2, emotional distant. Avoidants don't like to get close emotionally speaking. They try to always keep you at arm's length. And if you're an avoidant, you probably have friends, maybe lots of them, but none of them are so super close. Maybe there's one if you're lucky and if you've let someone in, but usually avoidants, they can be kind of loners. They'll be very comfortable in their own company. They don't really need other people in the same way that normal people need others. They might even call themselves introverts. That's an expression that I've heard many avoidants use about themselves, that they don't really need that much social stimulation. But you'll also see the avoidant person who's a social butterfly, but who just never really lets anyone in. They can small talk with you all day long, but when it comes to emotional intimacy, they just won't go there with you. This is because they fear that if they become too emotionally close to someone, that they'll lose their independence. So you'll often see avoidants avoiding intimacy at all costs. Sign number 3. Suppression of emotions. If you're someone who is suppressing your emotions, who don't feel comfortable dealing with emotions, you probably don't even know how to. And honestly, most people don't know how to deal with emotions, so I don't blame you for that at all. Nobody teaches us how to do this stuff, how to do emotions in school. They really should, but they don't. So most of us are very confused. And avoidants are especially confused. This is like a foreign language to them. They don't really know what to do with emotions. That's why it's easier to just suppress them. It's easier to just not deal with them, just put them in a box somewhere, lock the box, throw away the key, and not think about it. Sign number 4. You'll often hear avoidants downplaying relationships as if they don't have so much importance. That can be romantic relationships and also close friendships, because people are, it feels dangerous for the avoidant person to attach to someone, so they downplay it as if it's not a big deal, it's not that important, they can always meet someone else, they don't really know if they even want to get married, they don't know if they even want kids, you know, it's not that important, it's not a priority for them. And it's kind of true, it is not a priority for many avoidants. Relationships will often be the second priority to, for example, let's say work could be the first priority. And that's how it is for many. Sign number 5, avoiding conflict. Avoidants don't like conflict, so they just steer away from it. If a conflict arises, they'll be the first one to walk out the door, not deal with it, to shut down completely and not communicate with you. If you're someone who's avoidant, and I'm sure you can recognize this feeling of just like emotionally, it's like a blanket is put over you and you don't move, like you go into complete freeze. You don't say anything, you just sit with your phone scrolling and your partner is yapping away, right? When you just don't want to engage. Like, you are very, very fearful of conflict and you don't want it. It feels scary. It's about all that emotional stuff. You're not comfortable there. You would rather just avoid the conflict. Sign number 6. You really don't like seeking support or help. You see it as a weakness. Avoidants see it as something that means that they're not good enough, that they need someone else's help to rely on them, like going to a therapist or a coach or someone like that. They don't see it as something that is honorable. So that's why you don't see them seeking help very often unless someone pushes them to do so. Often the partner. I work with many avoidants. I love working with avoidants. It's not coming from a bad place, it's an attachment wound. So when we work with these things, it can get better. But most avoidants who come to me, honestly, they come to me because their partner has pushed them to, or because their partner left them because of their avoidant tendencies. Avoidants want to solve problems on their own. So their first step for them would probably be to do some research on a topic themselves and then start working through their attachment styles all by themselves, instead of delegating it to someone else to help them work through this attachment wound towards the secure attachment. Sign number 7, an avoidant will often hide the truth or hide parts of themselves, both because they fear the rejection of someone actually knowing them and then not liking what they're seeing, or because they just like to keep some privacy. They really value privacy. So that means that sometimes they'll outright lie to you, and other times they'll just have like a secret life that you don't know about. And I don't mean necessarily that they're out there cheating all the time. No, I mean, it could just be that they're at home playing video games all night, and they never tell you about it because they think it's embarrassing, and it's something that they keep for themselves. And it's also a way for them to feel like, I still have my independence even though I'm in a relationship, because I have this thing that I do and I don't tell my partner about it, and it's just for me. Again, we have to understand that these are not evil people. They have an attachment wound. If you're an avoidant, please understand you're not a bad person. You have an attachment wound. You probably have some trauma that needs to be addressed. So I highly recommend that if you found this video, seek support, seek help. You're welcome to reach out to me. There's a link to work with me in the description below. Dealing with an avoidant partner can be incredibly challenging, especially if you're someone who looks for emotional closeness and connection with your partner, and it requires a lot of patience and understanding. So here are some tips on how to deal with an avoidant partner. First and foremost, you need to respect their space. You need to allow them to have alone time. Don't take it personal. If they want alone time, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the fact that they recharge by themselves, balance their emotions, and re-regulate. So allow them to have their private space and allow them to have their privacy. Don't see their privacy as a threat to the relationship or as a threat to you. Dismissive avoidants highly value their independence, so you need to be respectful of that, even if that's not how you operate in relationships. There's just no way of pushing it with a person like this. You also need to create a non-judgmental environment for the avoidant person. Because if someone has this attachment style, it comes from trauma. So it comes from early experiences where they felt abandoned, neglected, judged, criticized. And that's why they're so private now. That's why they don't share much. They're very afraid of your judgment and they're very, very sensitive to it. So be careful before you criticize or judge someone who has this type of attachment style. They'll likely react very negatively to any form of even small criticism that seems insignificant to you. For them, it's a wound, and you're just pouring salt into that little wound when you're criticizing them. Again, I know it's not possible for you to be the perfect partner, but I'm just giving you some tips on how to deal with a personality type like this. The best you can do is try to be as non-judgmental as you possibly can, without pushing them, just creating an environment where they feel like if they come to you with some kind of vulnerability or something similar, that you don't judge it, that you just listen, that you're super accepting of it, so they slowly learn that it's a safe space with you to open up and be themselves. It's going to take some time, and you're going to need to be really, really patient, because they're not going to open up from one day to the next. And if you try to push them to open up, please don't. It's going to have the exact opposite effect, and they'll completely shut down and they won't budge an inch. You can try sharing some vulnerabilities yourself, but it can backfire because they're not that comfortable with vulnerability and emotional intimacy in general. You should also try to communicate in a way that is calm, clear, collected. You don't want to have some kind of emotional breakdown in front of an avoidant partner. That will make them very, very scared. They're not comfortable with emotions. They're not comfortable with conflict. They're not comfortable with any of this stuff. They want to avoid it. They want to just retrieve into themselves, leave the room, not speak to you for 5 days until you've calmed down, and then maybe, probably, hopefully never speak about it again. So try, if you feel like you're having a strong emotional reaction to something, try and see if you can go into the other room and regulate yourself before you communicate to the avoidant person. This is actually a tip you should use with just anyone. It's never good to put your emotional dysregulation onto other people. Always try to regulate yourself first before you communicate, because then when you do communicate, it'll be in a much more understandable fashion, calm fashion, rational fashion, and the person will be able to receive it much better. But especially with dismissive avoidance, you do not want to have some kind of emotional outburst in front of them. They're going to be scared of you. It's also a good idea to educate yourself on avoidant attachment. I have plenty of videos here. I'm going to link to one of them up here, and otherwise you can go to my channel. I have a whole playlist of videos that are concerning this particular attachment style. Educate yourself so you understand them better, because otherwise you're going to end up taking a lot of their behavior personal, and you really shouldn't. This is just a response that they have to the world because they've experienced abandonment, neglect, some uncomfortable things in their past, either in their childhood or in previous relationships. And the more you understand how the mechanisms of this attachment style work, the better a partner you'll be able to be. The next one here is a bit tricky, because I also don't want you to abandon yourself. But overwhelming an avoidant person with your emotional needs in a relationship is not a good idea. Remember what I started by saying here. Don't abandon yourself either. It's really about keeping a balance here, and it's very difficult, and many people can't find that balance. Because the truth is, you cannot 100% know that the avoidant partner will take those emotional needs into consideration, or even understand them, or even want to take them into consideration. Many avoidants will feel like it's a blockage towards their freedom and their independence, having to deal with your needs. It's such a burden for them, right? Because they're not that comfortable in that space. So you got to find the balance between dealing with those needs you have yourself, and maybe reaching out to friends or family members who can be there for you, and then just take what you can get from the avoidant partner, because they may be able to slowly learn how to meet your emotional needs in a relationship, but you just can't count on it. You see, it's pretty tricky. So that's why relationships with avoidance often don't work out long term, because very few people are able to find that balance. Either they'll completely self-abandon and pretend like they have no needs in front of the avoidant person, or they'll continue begging and begging and begging for their emotional needs to be met, especially for someone who has an anxious attachment style. This is an absolute disaster. And unfortunately, anxious and avoidance, they often meet each other, find each other, opposites attract, end up in relationships together, and it's very dysfunctional unless they both work on themselves and try to become a bit more secure in their attachment style. But you got to take care of yourself as well, okay? So this video, of course, it's about how to deal with the avoidant, but not at all costs. You know, you can't completely abandon yourself, your needs, and your own life in order to just please this person who has a trauma wound, right? Who has this attachment style. Which brings me to my next point. It's really important that you also learn how to set boundaries in terms of how much you're willing to deal with the avoidance quirks. You have to set some boundaries for yourself, or even take some alone time away from the avoidant to nurture your own needs and meet up with friends who can be there for you, who are comfortable with intimacy and emotional closeness. So you also thrive in this relationship, because there are two people in a relationship and you have to thrive and the avoidant partner has to thrive on their own terms as well. So focus on your own well-being. It's very important. And it's very important that you don't let this get to your self-esteem, because it isn't about you, like I said before. It's no matter who this avoidant partner of yours would be with, they would be having these behaviors. So it has nothing to do with you. You cannot save them. You can probably not change them. You can try, but the more you push, the more they're probably going to pull away, because that's the dynamic there. It has to kind of come to them naturally, or sometimes with some of my avoidant clients, there have been some sort of an ultimatum where the partner has left them unless they get some coaching or counseling, and that's when they seek help with me. And many of them, they're very good, well-meaning people. It's not that they're trying to hurt their partner, they're just not comfortable, and they've got a lot of stuff to work out, which is best to do in a professional setting. So if your avoidant partner is open and willing to it, go to couples coaching, couples counseling, do something where there's a third party there who can help you and the avoidant partner see eye to eye, so you actually have a chance of making it work together. It's not impossible to have a relationship with someone who has this attachment style, but it is challenging and it requires a lot from you. Dismissive avoidants often lie or hide the truth, and they don't necessarily do this with malintent. For many, it's just a coping mechanism. Let's start by defining what dismissive avoidant attachment style is. So a dismissive avoidant attachment style is one of the 3 insecure attachment styles in relationships. The dismissive avoidant has low emotional intelligence. They're not very comfortable with vulnerability. They don't like intimacy, and they have a high need for independence. They can often be quite difficult to be in relationships with because of their lack of sensitivity and maybe even empathy sometimes. They're very consumed with their own world, and that they like to deal with problems by themselves. They don't often reach out. This is, of course, a product of childhood trauma. So we're not trying to shame or blame the dismissive avoidance here. We're just trying to understand them better. Let's dive deeper into it. Why do they often lie, and why do they hide the truth? There are several reasons. I'm not condoning it or defending it. Again, we're just trying to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Okay. So first of all, a dismissive avoidant has a fear of intimacy. A true fear of intimacy, because they connect intimacy with danger, with something that's unsafe, because that's how it was for them earlier in their life. So opening up to someone, being vulnerable to someone, showing someone their true self is not something that they're very comfortable with. So they're going to try to avoid that at all cost. And as you could probably guess, that means that they'll have to hide the truth of who they are often. Sometimes dismissive avoidance can even come off as people pleasers, or like the good guy who's just happy with every choice you make because they don't really want to show you their true colors, what they really like, what they really want to do, because that's vulnerability. Because if they show that, then they can feel rejection from you. It feels too risky. So they just choose to hide parts of themselves. They choose to maybe even outright lie to you sometimes about their preferences. I have many clients who are dismissive avoidants, and some of them have simply been leading double lives. And these are the extreme cases, but I have experienced that with quite a few clients, where suddenly the wife finds out after 10 years that her husband, or the other way around, or vice versa, because it could be the wife can be the dismissive avoidant in a relationship as well, right? After 10 years finding out that the spouse has been living a completely different life, that the spouse never shared or just completely hid from the family. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with cheating. It can also just be like gaming addiction, porn addiction, anything really. The point here is that avoidants, they don't really want to show you who they are. It really scares them. Avoidants also have a big desire for independence. So for them, it's very scary getting into a relationship, because in a relationship, you do to some extent have to become at least a little bit dependent on your partner in order to be co-parenting and in order to be just sharing the rent in a house or buying a house together or and whatnot. You have to be able to cooperate with people. You have to be, again, it's a bit of vulnerability, but they really don't like that. They really value freedom. So for them, it can almost be a way to prove to themselves that they still have the freedom and that they still have the independence, the fact that they are not sharing their whole life and all of their thoughts with their partner. It's like some of this is just for them. Okay, so maybe whenever they go on a trip, they behave completely differently. They go to a casino or whatever, and they won't tell their spouse. And it's a way for them to feel, I'm still my own person, I'm still independent, I'm not constantly being enmeshed and surveilled by my partner. I can have my own private things. And to some extent, it's okay. I think all people are entitled to privacy in a relationship as long as the things that are being hidden aren't damaging to the relationship or outright betrayals. It's a way of keeping their partner and everyone else in their life at arm's length. Like, you never really get allowed to get too close to the dismissive avoidant. You really don't. They'll always keep you at a certain distance. And the next one is a big one here. Avoidance of conflict. Avoidants, they don't like conflict. They would actually prefer to avoid conflict at all cost. And you can see how that can easily make a person lie about small details, big details, because they don't want the conflict. They don't want the consequences. They don't want to have to fight for an entire evening with their partner. They'd rather just not share whatever it is that they did that they know that the partner wouldn't like. But you can see how that can be very problematic, because distrust can be built in a relationship, because then maybe one time the partner finds out that the dismissive avoidant was lying about something, and then there's suddenly distrust in the relationship, and then the trust has to be rebuilt, and the avoidant is not going to be very proactive or good at rebuilding trust because they don't have a very high emotional intelligence. So it's quite problematic. But they really don't like conflict. And if you're with an avoidant partner, I'm sure you can recognize this. You've experienced this many times. They don't want to talk. Some of them even leave the room when a conversation starts, or when a conflict is about to build up, they'll just leave and you won't hear from them. They don't want to deal with it. It comes from being uncomfortable. They're incredibly uncomfortable with conflict. So they'll avoid it at all cost. Again, mind you that being dismissive avoidant, it's kind of a spectrum. Some are very far up the end of extremities in terms of these things, and others, they just have a few of these symptoms. Some of them, it's not going to be that bad, and it's going to be doable to be in a relationship with them. And then there are other dismissive avoidants who are simply so difficult to deal with that they are almost incapable of being in a relationship, long term at least. Avoidants also hide who they are as a way of protecting themselves. They don't like feeling judged. They have a very fragile ego often, and they can't bear getting judged. It is so uncomfortable for them. So that's another reason why they would hide aspects of themselves, especially the aspects of themselves that they themselves judge. The aspects of themselves that they feel are unworthy and not good enough, they're not going to show that to anyone. And it's fair enough. I think we all do that. We all kind of try to put our best foot forward when we're out and about and when we're meeting people. But it's kind of different with your spouse or your partner. You should feel safe enough, and you should be allowed to be your vulnerable self and even show your flaws, right? And that could even be part of the healing, to show your flaws to your spouse and your partner and have them accept you anyway, which, if they're a good spouse and partner, they'll try to do. And then to my last point here today in the video, they have low emotional intelligence. So for them, there's a lot of this emotions and communication, conversations, empathy. They don't really understand it. They don't really understand it. It's like a foreign language to them. They try their best, but at the end of the day, they're very uncomfortable in this setting. They're much more comfortable, for example, at work. Many of them are very, very successful because they're also super independent and they like to be independent. And being successful is some sort of a guarantee that you can take care of yourself financially, that you don't need anybody. It gives a sense of power, and also they're very comfortable. Very, very comfortable at work because you don't have to get too close to your colleagues. They'll always be at arm's length, but you can still have fun and communicate with people, and it doesn't get too deep. So they're much more comfortable in those types of settings than they are in a family setting or in a setting with a partner. So that's definitely also one of the big issues and one of the reasons why maybe they can't even understand that what they're doing is detrimental to their relationships. So hiding parts of themselves, maybe they don't even have the awareness, the self-awareness to see how harmful that could be both for them and for their partners. And unfortunately, because this lack of awareness, they seldom seek help. It is not that often that I work with avoidants who haven't been pushed to go and seek out professional help by their partners. It's not that often something that they just do by themselves. They usually come to me when something has gone wrong and the partner has said, you need to work with a professional, otherwise this relationship can't continue. So many of my avoidant clients, they're amazing and they're having these huge realizations when they start learning about emotions and how to deal with them. And because most of them, it's really not coming from a bad place. It's just a coping mechanism and it's a trauma wound, and they're just trying their best, like we all do in this life. So it can definitely be healed, and I work with many avoidants who have completely overcome their avoidant attachment style and now they're more or less secure. I don't know if you can ever 100% overcome it, because sometimes if you get really, really pressured, you can switch back into your old patterns just for a moment, but then there'll be the self-awareness of, okay, now I'm doing the avoidant thing and I shouldn't be doing that. Let me just take a moment, gather myself, and I'll come back to the situation and be more balanced. I hope this video helped you understand the avoidant just a little bit better and understand why they often, unfortunately, lie and hide parts of themselves. If you're with an avoidant partner who has chosen to take some space right now and leave the relationship, at least for a while, you might want some tips on how to get them back. This can be particularly difficult to navigate because avoidants are fickle. You need to give them space and you need to respect their boundaries at the same time as you need to push a tiny bit in the right way in order to attract them back into your life. In this video, I'll be giving you some tips on how to navigate the situation that can be a bit tricky. When you want your avoidant partner back, you first and foremost have to understand the avoidant attachment style. If you don't understand what avoidant attachment is, there's not much hope, okay? I recommend you watch this video that I made about avoidance, which will give you a 101 on what it means to be avoidant in your attachment style. So do your research, figure out what works well with an avoidant, what doesn't work well with an avoidant. So you don't want to be pushing too much. You want to respect them. They have a huge need for autonomy and independence, and they often fear and feel that intimacy completely restricts their sense of freedom, and then they end up running away. They're very uncomfortable with vulnerability. They're very afraid of being rejected, and they're overly self-sufficient. This means that if your partner has chosen to leave you at this point in time, you need to first respect their space. Don't text too frequently. Don't call too frequently. Your avoidant partner is most likely re-regulating their nervous system by being by themselves again, because it's very triggering for them to be in a relationship and to be intimate. So now that they have chosen to separate from you, they're probably going through an internal process. So just let them go through that process. Let them so-called cool down first, okay? Don't bombard them with texts or call them all the time. It's not going to work. It's just going to make everything much, much worse. So you can choose a particular time and space every week where you send them a text that's pretty short and to the point. This will give you a better chance later on in terms of getting them back. And now, while you have this time and space, it's perfect for you to dive into the relationship patterns and try and analyze what was working and what wasn't working. Most likely, I bet that you were the one chasing the avoidant, or you were the anxious person who was trying to push for connection and push for intimacy. And the more you pushed, the more they probably pulled away. So you need to analyze the dynamics in the relationship and see what you could have done better. We already know they have an insecure attachment style, so they've got lots to work on. But that's out of your control. The only thing that's within your control is what you can do for yourself to work on your patterns and your part in this. So if you have anxious patterns, work on those. Was it this chaser dynamic where you were the chaser? You know, you were the golden retriever, always chasing them. They were the black cat, always pulling away and receiving, and you were the giver. And that's not healthy. You want to find a way to be in a relationship where it's more equal, where both people are securely comfortable chasing and receiving both. It's a perfect time for you to focus on yourself, focus on your personal interests, your independence. Maybe you've been putting all of your energy into this relationship, and it's now time for you to take some of that energy back and start hanging out with your friends more again. Start pursuing your goals. Just feel that you're self-sufficient without the avoidant. That's going to be very attractive to an avoidant person, and it's going to make them feel safe to go back to you, because if they see you being independent without them, it makes them feel like you're not smothering them, that like they're not being completely engulfed in your love, which is what they fear. They want their independence. So when you can show you have independence and self-sufficiency, that's attractive to them. When you do have conversations with the avoidant partner or ex, make sure that you're not being overly emotional. It will make them shut down completely. Make sure that you are calm, collected, and very precise in your communication, and that you don't blame them, because that will also make them shut down. You have to be very matter of fact and be very rational about the whole thing. If you go into too much emotional hoo-ha, they don't know how to navigate it, they don't know how to deal with it, and they will most likely shut down and avoid speaking to you again. Avoidants know that they're not comfortable and good with communication and emotions, but it doesn't help to guilt trip them. They won't get better just because you point out how bad they are at it. So try avoid doing that. All in all, you need to have a lot of patience with someone like this. It's gonna take time. They need their space. So you better just try and make the best of it. If you're too impatient, you might end up ruining it because you push too much and then they're just too far gone. At the same time, and I'm sorry for the mixed messages here, but at the same time, you have to make sure always, always, always that you respect yourself and your own boundaries, and that you don't overly abandon yourself. It can be very easy to abandon yourself with a person like this, because my advice here is basically just do everything that doesn't feel natural to you, distance yourself, do everything on their terms. Okay, so please take it with a grain of salt. You should definitely always honor what's doable for you and what isn't doable for you. And if this plan isn't doable for you, maybe it's not the best fit for you to be with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, especially if the person doesn't want to work on it. So make sure that you do communicate your boundaries clearly without guilt tripping and all the things I just mentioned before, but just communicate, I'm here, this is what I want, because it's fair. You have limits. An example of this could be that one of your boundaries is that you have emotional needs in a relationship, and you have to be able to express your emotions at certain times to the avoidant partner. It's okay for you to voice that. You don't have to eliminate your emotional needs, but just know that it's going to be a hard pill for them to swallow. Which brings me to my next point. The reason why someone even has an avoidant attachment style is usually that there's been some trauma, there's been some problems in the past. So if they could start addressing those underlying issues, it would be much easier for the two of you to get back together and have a healthy relationship. It's not your job to be their therapist. It's not your job to push them into watching YouTube videos. But if you can give them a little nudge and see if they're open to it, you can do that, but please do it without too much pressure. Otherwise, it'll backfire and they won't do anything. But if you have an avoidant ex who is open to therapy or working with a coach, that would be amazing. You're welcome to reach out to me. There's a link in the description here below. Another good point is that if you can show them that you're worth the effort, and I know you are, I know you're worthy of this love, I'm absolutely not indicating that you're not, but if you can show them and model what a healthy, good, balanced relationship is and how much of a benefit a good, healthy relationship can be in your life, that would be, in their life, that would be amazing, because avoidants, they often feel that they would be better off by themselves and that other people are basically just a hindrance, a burden. They make everything more complicated, more difficult. So if you can show them that no, being with me actually makes your life more calm, more easy, and you have so many benefits. Again, don't people please too much. Just model a healthy relationship pattern to them. And you're not going to like this one, but be prepared for any outcome. With avoidance, sometimes when they have shut down, they've shut down and it's just over and done with. Other times, there might be something you can do. And once they feel emotionally safe again, which is because of the withdrawal, that they've regulated their emotions by themselves, they can come back and try again and try and learn from their mistakes and try and heal. I do work with a lot of avoidants who want to heal, and many of them have. You absolutely can, but it of course requires willingness. But you need to ask yourself, am I willing to be with someone who is this difficult to be with? Maybe you are, maybe they're totally worth it. Maybe they're not. It really depends on how much it affects your mental well-being to be with them. Like I said, getting an avoidant partner back requires a lot of patience and it's pretty tricky, but I see it happening all the time, so it's definitely not impossible. Just make sure that you also prioritize your own well-being in the midst of all of this.